Oh, Meghan Markle's fashion feud has now been revealed.
Allegedly, Meghan Markle caught on camera wearing $1,695 designer dress she was once accused of stealing.
Staffers on the shoot believed the former starlet allegedly walked off with several items that day without permission, including the dress she is now proudly wearing 3 years later.
This woman is a thief. She's not even a royal thief. She's a Hollywood thief.
Weird, and I think, she lies very easily, and she'll look you in the eyes and just lie right to you. So I'm not shocked that she's stealing dresses, and I'm not shocked that she's a kleptomaniac.
But she's terrible. I mean, I expect she was giving him the eye, the most richest man in the country, and, wants him to help her become a billionaire herself.
Her worst Hollywood grift, which is stealing clothes. This is stealing clothes. It goes to show that even Hollywood is done with this woman.
So Dior just shut down Meghan, sticky fingers Markle. And the fashion world hasn't been the same since. This wasn't a rumor. This wasn't a PR misunderstanding. This wasn't the quiet politics of fashion houses trying to protect their reputation. This was a decision, sharp, deliberate, and quietly devastating, from one of the most prestigious luxury brands on the planet. Dior doesn't move like this for just anyone. They don't distance themselves carelessly. They don't cut ties because of gossip. When Dior steps back, it's because something has gone deeply, undeniably wrong. And insiders are now saying the industry has been biting its tongue for years, until that one decision snapped the silence clean in half.
2 months ago, there was tons of buzz that Meghan Markle was going to be the next face of Dior, or the next brand ambassador signed to the French design house. But then that deal got completely squashed in the press by Dior themselves. A spokesperson came forward to say, "We haven't even talked to the Meg." But the issue was much more complex than just that and that alone. Throughout 2023, the rumors were Duchess Dior was gonna be a thing.
Once Dior made its move, the entire fashion world suddenly remembered all the warnings they'd brushed aside, all the small stories they'd ignored, and all the red flags they'd pretended weren't connected. Because this wasn't about a single dress or a single moment. It was about a pattern, one that began long before Meghan stepped onto a palace balcony or posed in couture. A pattern involving borrowed pieces that didn't return, designers who quietly stopped lending, stylists who exchanged looks behind the scenes, brand managers who lost emails on purpose, and wardrobe coordinators who started keeping extra documentation.
Meghan Markle's holiday special, I know you can't wait for that. You can see Meghan decorating her home in a green gown, and eagle-eyed viewers noticed this was the same green gown she wore during a 2022 photo shoot for Variety.
Dior's silence wasn't silence. It was the final confirmation. And the spark that brought everything roaring back into focus was as small and simple as a dress, a soft green gown from a Variety photo shoot that should have been returned the second the camera clicked off. But it didn't return. It vanished. And years later, it came back on Meghan's body like nothing had ever happened.
Right, okay? She's apparently stolen several dresses according to our sleuths on the internet, but let's talk about one right now, okay? So she allegedly stole a $1,695 designer gown that she wore in a promo video for her upcoming Netflix holiday special. Okay, apparently she stole this from a Variety photo shoot in October 2022. She did not return a lot of stuff after she wore it in a very high-profile photo shoot.
That single moment flipped the entire narrative, because now the fashion world had a receipt, the kind you can't ignore, can't deny, and can't explain away. Suddenly, whispers weren't whispers anymore. People began connecting dots. And Dior, the house that dresses queens, princesses, and women with spotless reputations, finally stepped back from Meghan with a quiet, unmistakable no more.
There were reports that have been generated for years now that she allegedly took things off the set of the Variety shoot without Variety's permission. The initial claim was made in 2024 on Andrew Gold's Heretics podcast, that she did not return a lot of stuff after she wore, it for a very high profile photo shoot that we believe is Variety. And so, no, we're not going to respond in the same way when there were reports that you took something that didn't belong to you.
But to understand why, we have to rewind. Far before the green dress, far before the palace, far before the headlines. Because the first red flag didn't come from a magazine shoot. It came from Toronto. And once you hear that story, Dior's decision makes sense in a way that's almost uncomfortable. To understand why the green dress changed everything, you have to understand the standard the fashion world lives by. Editorial shoots follow a strict process. You borrow a piece, it gets logged, It gets worn, it gets returned. End of story. It's predictable, clean, professional. But Meghan's green variety gown broke that system in the most confusing way possible.
Just tell me that she took the dress, but one source was saying that she did not ask, which is very, it's just not the correct etiquette for something like that.
It wasn't a gift. It wasn't a purchase. It wasn't part of a collaboration. It was a loan, a temporary documented piece that should have gone straight back into the designer's archive, except it didn't. When the shoot wrapped, the dress was simply gone.
That's the gown. It appears. It's just appeared in her promo for the holiday special of With Love Meghan, probably the last ever Meghan production you'll see on Netflix at Christmas. 2022, she was given this to put on for this photo shoot, and basically the story is that she walked off with it. She just walked off with it.
No one panicked, not at first. Magazine sets get chaotic. Things get misplaced. Assistants grab the wrong bags. But assistants also find those things later, return them, or at least report them. But with Meghan, Little Miss Mastermind missing material, that never happened. The dress stayed missing. Emails were sent, then ignored. And eventually, the designer's team gave up, until 3 years later, when Meghan reappeared wearing that same unmistakable gown. Not a recreation, not a similar cut, the exact dress. And that's when all the small odd stories from years prior suddenly snapped into alignment. Stylists remembered that items borrowed for shoots sometimes didn't return. Wardrobe teams remembered that some outfits worn on camera never showed up back on the rack. Brand managers remembered uncomfortable follow-up calls about pieces that were probably in transit but never arrived. What everyone assumed were isolated mix-ups suddenly looked like a chronic pattern. And for designers, especially luxury houses, pattern is everything. Patterns determine trust. Trust determines access. And access determines who gets dressed and who doesn't. The green dress wasn't just a moment. It was the moment everything clicked.
There was also in October, she was spotted in a black and white tweed strapless midi dress, which was designed by Chanel during a date night with Prince Harry, the private club, NYC club, Chez Margot. Apparently she'd worn that designer piece to a photo shoot in 2022 for The Cut. So the suggestion was that she walked off the set without asking permission for it.
But the truth is, this wasn't the first time fashion insiders felt something was off. The earliest warning came much earlier, long before Meghan became the Duchess of Sussex. And that first warning, it wasn't subtle. It involved a commercial shoot in Toronto and a pair of heels that would later become impossible to ignore. This wasn't a massive production or a high-profile campaign. It was a Reitman's commercial, straightforward, professional, and tightly managed. Wardrobe departments on commercial sets are meticulous. Every dress, every shoe, every accessory is logged and tracked with military-level discipline. But on the day Meghan wrapped filming, multiple items were missing. Not delayed, not misfiled, not misplaced, missing. A few dresses, some accessories, and most importantly, the Aquazzura Very Matilda heels featured prominently in the shoot.
You know, many examples of Megxie allegedly stealing from various photo shoots in the past, i.e. Reitman's with the Aquazzura shoes and re-wearing them at the engagement announcement.
Wardrobe didn't panic. They assumed it was a mistake. But months later, those exact heels turned up. Not on a rack, not returned, not explained, but on Meghan's feet during her royal engagement announcement. This wasn't speculation. Everyone on that set recognized those shoes instantly. When asked about them, Meghan allegedly gave a simple answer. She didn't want items she wore ending up on resale sites because she was too recognizable.
Brace yourself for this, Kevin. It's standard for talent to retain select items from photo shoots, sometimes for security reasons, including to prevent a potential resale or unauthorized auction. Clothing worn by members of the royal family and other public figures has been targeted for resale in the past, making the practice both common and precautionary. So basically, Meghan saying, I hate my diehard fans that would want to buy something I wore.
That explanation raised more questions than answers. Why not pay for them? Why not ask? Why remove them without clearance? From that day forward, a quiet warning traveled through industry circles. Be careful. Items disappear around her. It wasn't a public scandal. It wasn't shouted across social media, but inside the fashion world, it stuck. And when the green variety gown resurfaced years later, every Toronto memory hit the industry like a lightning bolt. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't bad luck. This was a pattern, and it was about to collide headfirst with the strictest wardrobe system on Earth, the royal family. When Meghan entered Kensington Palace, everything changed, not just for her, but for everyone responsible for royal protocol. Hollywood's rules didn't apply here. There was no perks culture, No freebies, no brand gifting, no in exchange for exposure. Royal family members cannot accept free clothing, period. Every piece must be purchased, logged, and archived. But insiders say Meghan didn't accept that reality easily. And then came the wardrobe budget. Princess Catherine, around £100,000 a year. Meghan Markle, approaching £1 million within her first year, with fewer engagements and less public duty. Designers contacted the palace asking when their pieces would be returned. Wardrobe teams struggled to track items that seemed to vanish. Outfits worn once disappeared from rotation with no record of where they went. Prince Charles attempted a gentle conversation about expectations, but insiders say Meghan interpreted it as personal criticism, and that moment marked the beginning of a deep emotional fracture inside the royal household. Behind closed doors, staff began to whisper, "This isn't a budget problem, it's a behavior problem." And the fashion world began sensing it too, because while the palace was dealing with missing outfits, overspending, and protocol clashes, the fashion industry was dealing with something even louder. Dior was watching and preparing to make its move. While the palace was quietly drowning in wardrobe chaos, the fashion industry was experiencing its own shift, a shift that started subtly but grew impossible to ignore. And it began with someone who almost never gets pulled into drama, a British fashion icon with a spotless global reputation. At first, she greeted Meghan with warmth, professional courtesy, the kind of respect she extends to women who step into the public eye under intense scrutiny. But the moment whispers turned into recognizable patterns. That warmth cooled, not dramatically, not rudely, but unmistakably. This wasn't jealousy. This wasn't rivalry. This was boundaries. According to insiders, Meghan crossed lines this designer held firm. Lines about trust, respect for clothing, and understanding how the fashion world actually works. You can't treat couture the way you treat freebies. You can't treat archival pieces like party favors, and you definitely can't assume your image is a form of payment.
And her people have said, oh, no. It's all part of, and I quote, archiving her clothes as a royal. So
well, it gets worse because they've talked to People magazine, as one does.
Okay.
There's been a new statement to People magazine.
Okay, what is it?
Yeah, I mean, yes, we do have to dissect the fact that someone tried to justify this by saying that they archived her clothes, and
from that point on, the energy shifted. Invitations got fewer, emails were delegated, requests were routed through layers of assistants. Opportunities she once entertained now went unanswered. And just like that, the fashion world, a place that relies on quiet communication and shared caution, began protecting itself. Stylists stopped volunteering samples. Lookbooks were no longer sent. PR teams politely lost emails. Loan approvals came back stamped unavailable, not out of spite, not out of gossip, but because people were connecting dots. Meanwhile, palace staff saw something different, but equally troubling. Meghan did not respond well to boundaries. Every time someone attempted to guide her on protocol, the tension rose. Staff described it as a wall, a silent, growing barrier between her and the institution. And that wall was felt everywhere, from London boardrooms to Hollywood stylists to Paris fashion houses. Because if Toronto was a warning, and the green dress was the spark, and the wardrobe spending was the red flag, then Dior's silent withdrawal was about to become the industry's final verdict. To understand why Dior stepping back hit so hard, you have to look at the pattern. Not the isolated incidents, not the headlines, not the rumors, but the consistency. Because insiders who watched this unfold didn't describe a one-time misunderstanding. They described a mindset. This has never been about money. Meghan's team has access. She lives in a multi-million-dollar mansion. She has high-value contracts. She has global recognition. So why, people wondered, would someone with that level of privilege walk away with items they didn't own? Insiders offered a simple explanation: entitlement, not necessity.
So Meghan Markle, after asking for freebies and being told you can't do that, she got really angry. So what did she do? Like every grifter, and this is again, and it goes hand in hand with what I've said. Meghan Markle is like a thief. She knew she wasn't going to stay at the royal household. She knew that she had a very short amount of time before she actually left. So she needed to steal and grab as much as she possibly could.
In Hollywood, wearing a designer's item is considered currency. You give exposure, they give the outfit. But the royal family doesn't work like that. High fashion doesn't work like that. And Dior definitely doesn't work like that. Inside luxury houses, every piece is tracked. Inside royalty, every item is archived. Inside elite fashion circles, trust is everything. So when Meghan brought the Hollywood perk mindset into these systems, there was immediate friction. Designers didn't feel respected. Wardrobe teams didn't feel secure. Brand managers didn't feel confident. And palace staff didn't feel heard. Why were so many clothes worn once, then never seen again? Why did so many designers avoid lending to her team? Why were follow-up emails unanswered? Why did loaned items keep vanishing? One designer summed it up without hesitation. It wasn't the clothes, it was the behavior. competitor. And when Dior, a brand that dresses royalty without blinking, chose distance, the fashion world understood the message instantly. Dior wasn't making a public statement. They weren't pointing fingers, they weren't playing into drama, they were doing something far more powerful, quietly walking away. And in fashion, silence like that is the clearest answer of all. Dior's decision didn't come with headlines, press releases, or dramatic interviews. It arrived the way the fashion world delivers its harshest verdicts: silently, professionally, and permanently. No comment, no explanation, no denial, just distance. And that silence hit Meghan's reputation harder than any public statement ever could. Because when Dior pulls back, it signals one thing to every major house on the planet: this relationship isn't worth the risk. From that moment on, every lingering suspicion people once pushed aside snapped into sharp focus. The Toronto heels, the missing dresses, the resurfaced green gown, the million-pound wardrobe spending, the designer boundaries, the palace frustration, the unreturned items, the behavioral clashes. This wasn't exaggerated. This wasn't a smear campaign. This was the industry connecting every dot Meghan hoped they'd never connect. And the most painful part, Meghan wanted to be a style icon, a global fashion figure with influence, presence, and power. But instead, she found herself on the wrong side of the very world she wanted to conquer. Not because she lacked taste, not because she lacked resources, not because she lacked access, but because the one thing the fashion world values above everything, trust, was gone. Once that evaporated, so did the partnerships, so did the opportunities, so did the open doors. And Dior's silence didn't just close one door, it shifted the entire hallway. When you strip this entire story down to its core, it isn't about a dress, it isn't about a pair of heels, it isn't about palace rules, budgets, or protocol. It isn't even about Dior. It's about a pattern, one that traveled with Meghan from Toronto to Hollywood to Kensington to Montecito, a pattern the fashion world tried to overlook until it resurfaced in the most undeniable way possible. That green dress didn't just reappear. It exposed everything the industry had been whispering for years. Dior didn't come out swinging. They didn't need to. Their silence said everything. Because in fashion, reputation is currency. And once that currency runs out, even the biggest names step away without looking back. So now it's your turn. Do you think this was one long misunderstanding, or was Dior simply the first house willing to act on what everyone else already knew? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to see where you stand. And if you want the truth behind the next celebrity meltdown the media won't touch, hit like, tap subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the stories coming next are even wilder. Also, don't forget to check out some of my other videos on the top of the screen. Thanks for watching. Until next time, stay tuned, stay safe, and stay informed. Only on Tea Time with Tina.